Okay, let's get into this. That feeling of unease lots of us had back in early 2025. Maybe you even bought some extra chocolate, just in case.
Oh yeah, you weren't imagining it. That anxiety was real. Talk about empty shelves, rising prices. It was definitely linked to those international trade disputes bubbling up.
It's amazing how global events hit home, isn't it?
Totally. It really shows how, connected everything is. Personal anxieties reflecting global trade. Fascinating stuff.
Right. So today's deep dive is all about fact-checking this idea.
Hmm.
Did China container ships really grind to a halt around April 10th, 2025? And did that kick off this slide towards a pretty bleak June outlook?
We've dug into news reports, analyst takes, shipping data from right around then. Let's see what was actually going on.
And maybe find out if that cup of chocolate was a surprisingly decent investment.
Huh, maybe. So the big question, a total stop or a massive disruption?
Yeah.
The evidence points much more towards a severe disruption. And the fuel for that fire, really rapid, really big tariff hikes between the US and China.
Okay, so talk about this tariff tsunami around April 10th.
Well, it was fast. Both sides, the US and China, slapped on these huge reciprocal tariffs. We're talking potentially like 125% added to what was already there.
Whoa, 125%. So maybe 145% total on something.
Exactly. Imagine the cost jump. And crucially, while the US paused tariffs for 90 days for most other countries.
But not China.
Nope. China, Hong Kong, Macau explicitly excluded. The market reaction was almost instant.
What did that look like on the ground or on the water?
Well, Hapag-Lloyd, big shipping line, reported a 30% drop in bookings China to the U.S., just like that. Zim, another carrier, actually suspended a whole China-U.S. service.
Suspended it entirely.
Yep. And Ocean Network Express, they were delaying things, canceling sailings, blank sailings.
So it wasn't like a physical blockade. Ships weren't being stopped.
No. It was economic. The incentive to ship just cratered. Shippers hit pause, canceled orders. Carriers reacted by canceling trips or, sailing with lots of empty space.
Okay, so ships were still moving, just less full and maybe fewer of them.
Precisely. And interestingly, average container rates actually went down for a bit.
Why?
It seems like the sheer uncertainty was the main driver. Nobody knew what policy was coming next.
Makes sense. Okay, what about transit times? We heard things like 30 days from China to LA, maybe 55 to New York.
Right, those numbers floated around. So typically, China to LA by sea, maybe 15 to 25 days, so 30 days is longer than usual, suggests delays were happening.
In New York.
Usually 25 to 40 days, so 55. Yeah, that's possible, but definitely points to significant holdups somewhere along the line.
But these times can vary a lot anyway, right? Weather, port traffic.
No, absolutely. Predicting exact arrival down to the day is always tricky. So many variables.
Which brings us to May, and this predicted huge drop, like 30–40% in arrivals on the West Coast. Did that actually happen?
Well, the official port data always lags a bit, but yeah, the real-time indicators, things like booking data, ship tracking, they absolutely showed a big drop was underway.
So those strong port numbers earlier in the year, Q1.
That was likely companies front-loading, basically rushing imports in before the tariffs hit hard. It masked an underlying weakness that was already there.
Gotcha. So what did the real-time data show in, say, late April, early May?
Okay, FreightWave's sonar data showed China to U.S. bookings plummeting down 44% compared to the year before in late April. LA bookings specifically down almost 19% year over year.
Wow, 44% overall.
Yeah, and Port Optimizer data backed it up. China to SoCal ship departures dropped nearly 30% in just 1 week at the start of May. Projected arrivals for the next week, down 44% year over year.
So fewer ships leaving, fewer ships expected to arrive.
Exactly. Scheduled arrivals in Long Beach took a nosedive. Estimated container volume, the actual TEUs, projected to fall almost 48% in early May compared to just a couple of weeks earlier.
And this wasn't just out on Long Beach.
No, we saw similar downward trends up in Seattle-Tacoma, too, with bookings and arrivals. It was a coast-wide thing.
Okay, so the ships slow down.
Right.
What are the ripple effects? Trucking? Warehouses?
Big ones. Less cargo arriving means less demand for trucks to haul it away from the ports. You started hearing reports of a, quote, precipitous drop in West Coast truckload demand. Warehouses face layoff concerns because, less stuff coming in. Rail freight felt it too.
It all connects. So let's talk June predictions. Were logistics stocks taking a hit?
They were definitely under pressure. Uncertainty, lower volumes. Yeah, companies like Hapag-Lloyd were already forecasting lower earnings for 2025.
And layoffs. Were those happening?
Highly probable, and reports suggest yes. We'd already seen thousands of logistics layoffs cited in March and April, blamed on tariffs and slowing demand even before this April crunch. Companies like Volvo, GM, Chewy, DHL, Maersk, trucking firms, many were cutting jobs. It looks set to continue.
What about specific sectors like auto parts or the used car market?
The auto industry looked particularly vulnerable. There were new 25% tariffs on imported cars and parts. And critically, that included parts even from Mexico and Canada under USMCA.
Even from partners.
Yeah. So the fear was parts shortages, which means higher prices for new cars, potentially thousands more. And if new cars get expensive...
Demand for used cars goes up, along with their prices.
Potentially, yes. A real disruption brewing there.
And just stuff. Durable goods, things on shelves. Was scarcity a real risk?
That was a bit more of a maybe. Depends. Lots of companies had front-loaded, built-up inventory buffers. So whether you saw widespread empty shelves really depended on how long the disruption continued versus how much people were buying.
So looking back, there was this optimistic view, maybe things snap back quickly versus the pessimistic one of continued trouble.
Right. And given how strong the policy stances were from both the U.S. and China and just how long it takes supply chains to really adjust, a super quick fix seemed, well, unlikely.
The inertia is just too great.
Exactly. So that pessimistic scenario, ongoing disruption, layoffs continuing, specific market pain like in autos that felt more plausible if those tariffs stayed locked in place?
Okay, so summing up, early 2025 wasn't just vague anxiety. It was real significant shipping disruption, tariff-driven, with serious potential economic consequences hitting logistics, autos, ripple effects across the board.
That's the picture the data paints. It was a serious jolt to the system.
And maybe that chocolate purchase. It wasn't about predicting the stock market, but it tapped into a valid sense of unease about economic stability, maybe even scarcity.
I think that's fair. It reflected a real uncertainty that was in the air.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. In a world where trade policy can shift so dramatically, so quickly, what other everyday things, maybe things we take for granted, could suddenly gain value? Not necessarily money value, but value in terms of, comfort, stability, just feeling normal, something to chew on perhaps.